All right, good morning. Today is day 63 of our AWD1000 Web Development Technologies class. Let me let Grant in. Morning, Grant. I'm just starting up right now. And as I said, today is day 63 of our class. It is Wednesday, the 12th of April, and we're going to do a couple things today. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the pretest, which was sent out to you last week or I guess earlier this week, and you had yesterday to work on it. I'm going to go through everything that I did to get it to work. Tomorrow will be the actual hands-on test. I will email you the test by 7 a.m. and I'll go over the test directions for about 10 minutes tomorrow morning as class starts. Friday will be our normal lab day. I'm hoping that next week we can go through all of section 3, which is advanced JavaScript skills. Now that's a lot to cover in a week, and I realize that. There are going to be some things that we're going to cover and hit heavier than other things. All right, but we'll talk about that next week. Again, as it says here, and really, again, this is kind of a mistake. This should say our chapters 8 to 10 because I didn't assign anything from 11. So your JavaScript chapters 8 through 10 written tests, labs, and homework are due this Sunday. All right. So with that said, what I wanted to do first, just literally for 5 minutes, hopefully, is to give you an idea of what to concentrate on. Sometimes people say to me, it's like, well, geez, what do I study for the test? You can probably already figure out what a lot of it's going to be. And we'll talk about that when we look at the pretest in just a moment. But as far as the basics, yeah, I mean, do you need to know how to use it? Well, it'd be kind of nice. This email application that's right here, we've talked about this before. This is kind of a nice one to look at because it was our first jump into jQuery. Plus, it is also a form here. So you can see some of the stuff that you can use in here. The asterisks are in here, etc. We've added jQuery into here, plus the actual code is shown here. All right. And I'm not saying you should do it exactly like this, or I'm not saying you shouldn't do it exactly like this. But if you get stuck, because one of the things on the test tomorrow will be basically taking the um, rock, paper, scissors form that we created in an earlier test and making a copy of it and basically jQuerying it, for lack of better words. Because what we had done previously is we had done a combination of using HTML validation, really HTML5 validation, and what's known as vanilla JavaScript. And I'm going to ask basically that you throw out or comment out or remove all of the HTML5 validation tomorrow and validate this form that's in there solely using using jQuery. So that's one of the big things that you're going to have to do. All right. At the end of the chapter here, and I know it's up a few pages, I should check and see where it is. But the chapter ends, if you remember, with giving you 3 different applications in here. This FAQ thing, I don't know if there's anything that's in there that's actually going to help you for the test. All right. It might. The image swap, I would look at this. I would look at the image swap here and the one that we did as a class for a homework assignment, because you are going to get something similar to this, similar yet different. I don't want to go over what it is right now. All right. But you will get something where you will have a series of images that I'm going to give you. All right. And when you click on one of those images, something will appear down here. You click there, something will appear down here, etc. So that stuff, all right, they show you how to preload basically in the HTML. They show you how to set up some of the CSS. But again, the key component here is the JavaScript and the jQuery. All right. And hopefully that will help you because that's part of what you're going to have to do. All right. There is nothing in here with image rollover. So you don't have to worry about that. Then from chapter 9, I really decided not to give you anything with animation on here. I mean, I tried and I originally put it on there. I originally had you going back to the home page and making a carousel. And I thought some people are going to get it. And some people are going to sit and struggle with it. And I didn't want to see you spending, a lot of time going through the stuff that's in here. So probably there's almost nothing. I'm going to say really there's virtually nothing from chapter 9 on this test. All right, so basically the test is 8 and 10. And again, as far as the test goes, um, there is this validation application that starts on page 318. All right, and if we take a look at it, okay, it what I'm asking you to do is not as ornate, so to speak, as this. You don't have to go in and set up the field sets and the legends, etc. All right, but here's a little hint for you. All right, I may come in and do something like this right here, meaning that if you put a couple radio buttons in here, and if you press one of these radio buttons, then what's right there will be grayed out. And if you press that radio button, it's not grayed out. So doing something like that. All right. And if you can understand what I just went over with you between that and what we're going to go over right now in this pretest, hopefully at least you'll be okay. All right. Again, next week we will go over chapters 12 through 16. You will have a test, but I don't, it's for sure it's not going to be on all those chapters. It'll probably be on 3 of them, and it won't be next week. It'll be the following week. All right, let's not worry about that right now. Okay, so with all that said, let's take a quick look at what was on the actual pretest here. All right. And hopefully the pretest wasn't too hard to understand, but I just keep adding to the original thing that was in here. So originally you were asked to make this. You made the BMI calculator and the guessing game. Okay. And you did that first. And then we went in the second test and we added event listeners. All right. And that was what was in here. And then now thing you were asked to do in here was to add a new form. Now, I will tell you, and I don't know, I have no idea. I'm not asking you, Grant. I'm not asking anybody. But what I have found a lot more than I thought is working with drop-down lists like this and jQuery, pardon my French, it's a pain in the ass. It really and truly is. So I'm not going to, if I ask you to do this, this field right here will not be mandatory. All right. I went in there and literally spent about 2 hours yesterday looking at some of the documentation for jQuery. Some of the stuff that they put in there literally just doesn't work. All right. So I'm going to show you what I did in just a couple minutes. All right. But you are to create a form like this one with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 fields. You were told to pre-populate. So either set the checked for the female or the male either one of those to check. It didn't matter. This technically we could have checked to make sure that you set up and you chose one of those, but I didn't even do that. All right, again, I'm going to show you exactly what I did in just a minute. So as it says there, we are supposed to validate each form field that contains the red asterisk, but as already mentioned, what I'm going to do, and I can't remove that from here, this is an image, all right, but the one with the state is not going to be mandatory. All right, use a generic form field constant. Also make sure that the zip code field is in that kind of format, either 5 numbers or 5 numbers, a hyphen, and 4 numbers. Use a pattern for that. Create an associated error constant. Do another pattern for the phone number to make sure it is in NNN-NNN-NNNN, where each N represents a number, using patterns, and again with an associated error constant. Finally, the email should use the pattern like the one shown in the Murach text with yet another associated constant. Finally, as I already mentioned to you, pre-select one of these 2 fields in here. All right. Then after you did that, what I wanted you to do was to make a copy of the BMI calculator, call it BMI jQuery, and a copy of the guessing game, call it GG jQuery. So you would basically, the way I did this is I made two brand new um, two brand new HTML files, bmijquery.js, I'm sorry, .html, and ggjquery.html. And then I added two JavaScript files, so bmijquery.js, ggjquery.js. All right, and redid this using jQuery for the JavaScript logic. I'm going to show you everything that I did. And as I mentioned, take a look at extra 9.1. So if we do take a quick look at that, that was this one. And again, there is one similar to that in your book. I think it's at the end of chapter 8, where they've got 4 fish pictures up here. And if you click on any one of the pictures, the thumbnails, it comes in down here. All right. So then to show you what I did, I'm just going to bring it up here. So this is it. Let me run it first. So the index is where I put this. I'll make this a little bigger here. Let's make it about 125. There we go. You'll notice if I put nothing in here, I get all this stuff. First name field is required, last name field is required, etc. All right. And as I start coming in and adding things, you can see how they're going away. That's exactly what I want to have happen here. And again, this is all being done using jQuery. All right. Whoops. You'll notice this says zip code field is required. And if I put in 1, all right, must be a valid zip code. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes away. If I put the dash in without the 4 digits, it comes back again. That's exactly what I want to have happen. So there, that's valid. But if I either remove a digit or I put in 1 too many digits, that comes up. All right. For the phone number, similar type of thing. If I put the phone number in like this, well, it took it. I don't know why, but it did. All right. But it should be put in and it should be checking, and I'll double check my code, that it looks like this. And the email should be like that as well here. And I'll just grab that one. Now you'll notice 2 things. When I click submit, you may have already seen it. First of all, when I click submit here, I just grabbed this. I just literally copied the one that they made in Murach that said, thank you for your request. But if you look up here, this was set up as a get. And if you look here, that is the query string. And when I say that is the query string, what I mean is everything after the question mark here. So all of this is the query string, everything that's in there. And you will notice if you look at it, it does match up with everything that I just put in. So let's take a look at that. I'm to the point right now, and you can feel free to disagree with me if you want to. And let me might have been open already, but I'm just going to open it from here. Um, I don't think that we have to take any time right now and go over the all right. I'm thinking we're to the point right now in where you are with your um, understanding of JavaScript, your understanding of especially HTML and CSS, that we don't have to go through that. I did put a little of my own CSS in here, but it wasn't much. All right. So taking a look in here then, let's just grab the index. And I call the one that was called contact jQuery.js. You could call that whatever you want, unless I decide I'm going to make you use names. So, but when you look in here again, I just want you to understand that to create this thing, all right, This was all online. I literally looked it up. I Googled being able to do that. And the reason I'm telling you that is that's 50 lines of code. I don't expect you to type that in. Go look for it online. All right. But let's look at the jQuery. And again, this is patterned very similarly after what was in the book. All right. So you'll see that at the beginning here, the first thing that I've done is I've created the patterns. This email pattern was taken right from our textbook, right from the Murach text. All right. I literally copied it in from there. The phone pattern and the zip code pattern, they were both taken from html5pattern.com. All right. So again, the phone pattern, as we talked about before, this says 3 digits, a hyphen, 3 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits. The zip code pattern, 5 digits, and an optional hyphen and 4 digits. All right, this is just literally, so after each field, I put in there like first name field is required, last name field is required, etc. All right. Then the next thing that was done here, as you can see, we set the focus to the first text box. So when the program began running, all right, the cursor should be there. All right. And again, then everything that I did, I based off of the submit handler. Now, one thing about this, and I'm gonna come right back to where I am, but if I go down to the bottom here, kind of important to put this in. If you found any errors, prevent the default. So that is saying when I attempt to submit the form, all right, so when I click the submit button, if there are any errors, forget about trying to submit it. Otherwise, as it says, give an alert that says all form checks have passed and tell it to submit the form. All right, so let's take a look at everything that's in here then. So real simple, boom. All right. And I don't remember if I exactly took this out of what was in the book or the assignment, or I changed it. I don't really remember. Again, one of the things we've talked about with using jQuery is there are a multiple number of ways always of doing the same thing. All right. And again, this is the one that I chose. So I created a first name, then a last name, then an address, then a city, then a state, then a zip, and then the phone number, etc., all the other stuff. So we're creating this. What does this say? This says go ahead and find whatever has the ID of first name, which is that text box, grab its value and trim it just in case all that was put in there were blank spaces. After you grab all that information, assign it to the local variable here, first name. Then check, and if that variable is empty, then what should happen is, all right, what is next, and this is what this is right here, first name next, is if we come down here, oops, sorry, it's up. There's first name, and there's next, right there. That's that span. Other ways that you can refer to this as well, but this is just the one that I used. So take that text and set it equal to first name plus a blank space plus FIR, which was field is required. So if I leave that blank, it should say first name is required. Okay. And of course, it sets is valid to false. Otherwise, it's making sure that I remove that red asterisk that was there. All right. And then we do the same thing with the last name. Not really any differences in here. All right. Then we did the address. So the only thing that's differing in these first 4 or 5 is the field name. Other than that, everything was set up exactly the same way. All right. Then the city. Okay. Then you'll notice, since with the zip, I'm sorry, with the state, you don't have to do any validation. That's skipped in here. Now, this is where it differs a little bit. All right. What do I mean? Well, the first test that you see after zip is the same one we've been making, and that is for an empty zip code. But the second test after the else if that you see right there, all right, that is testing to make sure that the zip code is following that pattern that we looked at. Again, either 5 digits or 5 digits, a hyphen, and 4 digits. All right. And if that fails, all right, so if this fails right here, then set the text to must be a valid zip code. And again, set is valid to false. But if this is not true, meaning there's something in there, and if this is not true, meaning it was a valid zip code, all right, then again, get rid of the red asterisk. Then we do a similar type of thing in here for the phone number. But again, what we are checking in here is, rather than the zip code pattern, we're checking the phone number pattern. All right. So again, it's a very similar type of operation. All right. And then finally, we've got the email, which again goes through the same type of thing. All right. So hopefully what you see in there is there's a lot of similarity. Of course, there are going to be differences, okay, because there are different kinds of things that are in here. But I do want you to understand, I want everybody to understand that what we had done previously in here is all of these fields that you see the red asterisk, we put the word required there. By putting the word required there, technically, you don't need any jQuery whatsoever to make sure that if those fields are required. All right. We're removing that. I don't want you to put the word required there. Again, I don't want you to do validation using HTML. I want you to do validation using jQuery. Now, there is a good chance that if you get a job and you are a web developer, you might be doing it all in HTML. You might be doing it all in jQuery, but most of the time, you're going to be doing it in some kind of a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in one form or another. All right. So that was the first one. All righty. And I'm taking for granted on this that, and again, granted, as always, you're the only one here, but if something doesn't make sense, you're going to ask. And if not you, if somebody watches this tape tonight and something doesn't make sense, by all means, email me and let me know. All right. So that was the first. So let's close both of these. And then let's go on and let's look at the calc BMI jQuery. All right. And I've got a JS file for that. And I've got a BMN or BMI jQuery file in here, a .html file. All right. I don't think I had to make many changes in the HTML other than, of course, make sure to add the jQuery. I went out to cdnjs.com. I have shown you this already, but for all of the examples in here, I just went out to cdnjs.com right here. Even here, typed in jQuery, grab the middle one that's right there. All right, copy that where it says copy script tag. And that's exactly what I put right here. Okay. I didn't move it onto multiple lines. I didn't do anything with it. Please make sure that when you do this like this, you put your reference to jQuery above or before your individual JavaScript line. And I know I've even mentioned this before. Some of you continue to do this. And quite often when you do that, by prefacing something with a forward slash, sometimes it works just fine. Sometimes it confuses the system. This says, hey, from where we currently are, find the JS folder, and in that JS folder, include that file. I believe that other than this, I don't think I changed anything in here, except I did come in and I changed this so that when you run it, there now is both the BMI jQuery and the game jQuery that are in here. All right. But this, as far as the stuff that's in here, nothing changed. At least not to my knowledge, nothing changed. And when you bring it up, all right, so there was home. We just went over that. There's the original BMI. There's the original guessing game. Here's the quote updated BMI calculator. And there's the updated guessing game. But again, with the ones that you see in here is done with event listeners. So is this. This is done with jQuery, and so is this. So we're going to look at both those, but just to show you that if I go over to here and I put in the same kind of stuff, so with nothing, and I click calculate, I get the height error. It should disappear. Okay. So I put in 72. Now I get the weight error. And again, it should disappear. So if I say 72 and 111 and I click calculate, there's all my stuff, the BMI, the status, the picture, they're all gone. If I do it again, there's a fit person. There is an overweight person. And there is an obese person. So all of the ones that are in here are still working, or at least appear to be. So let's take a look at what's in BMI JQ. All right, you can see it is running BMI jQuery.html, and that one is calling the BMI or the calc BMI. So what changed in here? As always, there are a multiple number of ways of running this. If the comment at the top, that's no biggie. But at the top, the big thing that you have to make sure you do in here is you want to remove that alias we made for the dollar selector. All right. You also want to remove your add event listeners from the bottom. Then you want to add at the top your document.ready. And again, everything that is being done in here is being done inside of, there's the beginning document.ready. And if I go down to the bottom, there is the ending document ready.ready. All right, so everything is done in there. Now, what we had previously in here is, again, remember that when we run this, we have two buttons, a calculate button and a reset form button. All right, so when you come into here, there's my calculate button. So I still have in here all of my constants. All right, these are the same ones as from the last program. All right, I come in here and I have all of my variables. And again, the same as from the last program. All right, and I have replaced the add event listener that we had earlier with just a calculate click. Now, these things that are in here, these alerts, etc., that's just stuff I put in there while I was testing. You don't even need any of that stuff, of course, in there. But again, you can see just like we had before, I've got a timer. I am grabbing the values. This is .val now. Remember before we were using value. So I'm tried as much as I could in here to incorporate as much jQuery in as possible. All right. Still have the call to validate height, still have the call to validate weight. And if they're valid, still have the call to calculate BMI. All right. Here I'm setting note. So notice rather than saying result dot value equal BMI, it's setting it up like this, the way we have been told or shown that when we are doing a set that we are working on in jQuery, we do it like this. This hasn't changed. This hasn't changed. This hasn't changed. So I come down here and there's our validate height. And I wanted to show you yet another way. So rather than saying here height dot next, so this would have been height dot next paren dot text, then that you can do it. This was the name I had given. All right, that was the name that I had given the the ID that I had been given to that span for a height error. And I've got a similar one to the span for a weight error. But you can see that by and large, most of the changes that are in here, all right, are rather superficial in nature. All right. I didn't change a whole heck of a lot. We could have done stuff. I thought of having you come in here and having stuff slide in and slide out, etc. But one of the things that is really important, and Grant, you're the kind of person who can identify with this because you've already taken the C# class, is I want people to understand and get out of this JavaScript logic. All right. And at least, the beginning of understanding syntax in here. But it's not that the jQuery special effects and the jQuery animations, etc. It's not that they're not important, all right, but in the mainstream of things, this kind of logic you'd be able to make this work in any language, including languages that basically don't even allow or have very, very minimalistic type of special effects and animations. All right. So again, this routine right here for validate height and this routine for validate weight are virtually the same thing. Again, other than replacing the H in height with a W in weight. All right. And then next, what were we saying in here? Well, that was valid and that was valid. Okay, so what else is left in here? Well, notice this. This is a clear button. That's the reset the form. So all that is saying is, hey, I'm setting up a timer. All right. And I'm saying call clear all. Could I have put the code right in here? The answer is yes. But by setting it up the way I did and having a separate routine called clear all, it is possible now to call that from multiple places if desired in my code. So the clear all, which is down near the bottom here, is right here. And again, you'll notice the difference syntactically, all right, in using val versus value. And I use the text directly in here. I didn't have to worry about next sibling and any of that other stuff. All right. It's not that it couldn't have been done this way, but quite often, at least what I have found, is when I use jQuery, the syntax is simpler when you take a look at it just to see what's happening in here. The other stuff that's in here, all right, so coming in here and calculating the BMI, that didn't change. Setting the status with these if statements, that didn't change. Setting the BMI picture, that didn't change. So I didn't change a line of that stuff. And then again, when the program runs, to be sure that the height is the thing that has the focus. All right. Now, in just a second, I'm going to go through the other one. That is the one for the guessing game. All right. But you'll see, like I said, the changes are not, for lack of better words, they're not monumental. But I will expect, and you will be asked tomorrow very similarly. I mean, what do we have? Still going to be working um, with the rock, paper, scissors. You have literally one file in rock, paper, scissors where you are doing all of your logic, and you are doing that logic using vanilla JavaScript and add event listeners, etc. I will ask you to copy that file, both the HTML file and the um, JavaScript file. And now I want an RPS jQuery.html and an RPS jQuery.js. So you will be doing something very, very similar to this in there. All right. So let me close these two. And we will bring up the other one here, which was again our jQuery game and our jQuery game HTML here. All right. Again, almost nothing in here has changed. As I mentioned, I added these two things at the bottom, so they're added as extra links up in my navigation bar. All right, but I think you all know how to do that just fine. And then down here, nothing changed in here, nothing in here. But down here, again, I went into cdnjs.com and I brought in jQuery, and I made sure that I put that above the file that I'm making, the game jQuery.js. All right. So in here, again, what you'll notice is very, very, very similar to what we'd already done in the last example. So again, replacing that $ alias that we had been using with our add event listener with the document.ready, putting everything inside of the document.ready, and down at the bottom, all right, removing our add event listeners that are in here. All right. And part of the reason for doing this and going through all of this mess, or whatever you would call it, is just the fact, all right, it's just the fact that, there's, I don't know, logic is logic, all right? And you see that you could write this as a quote vanilla JavaScript unquote, all right, routine just as easy as you could write it, all right, as a jQuery application. So other than what you see here in line 47, my constants are the same, all right, my variables are the same, okay. This make guess, this is what happens when you click the make guess button, all right. So as you can see, it's the same stuff. This is another time that when I tested it, anytime that I did go in, and there's a couple places in here where I did create a brand new random number. All right. I put an alert in there that showed the random number. All right. Just to make it easy for me while I was doing all the guessing and the like. All right. But other than that, in here, really nothing has changed in there or in here. All right. Now, here's where it started changing. This was again that guess text. So that out of range guess, that's the one that came up with guess out of range, guess OOR. All right. So remember what was in here. The non-number guess or the guess out of range, these two things that you see here and here, those are what appear when you run the program in here. So if I put in nothing, all right, yeah, I have that there. I guess I didn't need it. There's a non-numeric guess, all right? And if I put in something that's out of range, guess OOR, all right? Okay, So again, in here, what you see in this figure guess status is, again, I've come in here and I've used the val. So rather than guess status dot value equal guess, it's now guess status dot val and then guess in parens. Same thing with the total guesses. Same thing in here with if you have was too low, was too high, was correct. All right. I'm not going to be that surprised if when you do this test tomorrow that, you one or two, I mean, one of the reasons I'm putting in that thing with the image swap is I wanted to put something in there that would hopefully at least challenge some of you a little bit. All right. But, if you end up finishing this test in an hour or two, I'm not going to be that surprised. All right. This show the picture has not changed at all. This clear the form, yeah, that changed again syntactically. And this shows you this is one way that you can clear out a field, one way that you can clear out a field. All right. And I ended up Googling a lot of stuff. All right. Like, Googling how to remove everything that's in a div using jQuery, something like that. All right. This is when you click the new game button. And you'll notice when you start a new game, I'm clearing the form. I am showing what the random number is. I wouldn't want you to do that. All right. But there are things that you just should be doing naturally, clearing fields out, etc. That was one of the things I wanted to get through in here. And I wanted to make sure that that kind of stuff made sense to people. All right. Okay, so again, and I'm going to say this one more time because I don't want there to be surprises. You should be able to do something along these lines where you will have radio buttons. Could be gender. It could be something else. All right. Could be, do you want to get our, um, do you want to get our, I don't know. There's just there are things that we could put in here. Could be individual and corporate. I don't know. But you'll notice if you choose individual that is grayed out. All right. How do you gray that out? Basically, you're disabling it. And it does show you that in the code that is in here. Now, one thing I didn't do, probably could have done a lot better job of, all right, when you looked at the example that I gave you is, and again, I may put that in, I may not, I don't know, I haven't written the test yet. And that is, you really, I mean, email address, etc., password. And here, when you start looking at this stuff, if you want the phone number to be put in a certain format, it's kind of nice to put a placeholder in there. I mean, first name and last name. I mean, what are you going to put in here? Example, John, example, Smith. That's kind of silly. But for a phone number, for an email address, even if you want for a password, all right, sometimes with some of the stuff that you put in there, it's nice to have a placeholder. All right. So you should know how to do something like this. All right. And that was from chapter 10. Also, as I mentioned to you previously, it was somewhere near the end of chapter 8, this image swap. Take a look at that. You should be able to do something like this. With what I'm asking you to do in here tomorrow, I am going to give you all of the images. You won't have to worry about going out and finding anything. It's going to be a little different than this. That's all I want to say about it. All right. Okay. All right. And I had no idea how long this was going to take, and it is only 8:50. So let's do this. What was that number on there? let's at least get started in here. All right. And take a look at what we're going to be covering next. All righty. Okay. So these are known as advanced JavaScript skills. Chapter 12 is on using numbers, strings, and dates. Yes, we're going to do that. Chapter 13 is more about control structures. Guess what they show in there? How to use the switch. With cases and stuff, we've already been doing that. All right. We'll also talk about how exceptions are handled in JavaScript, and an exception is an exception to the norm. And there'll be more on regular expressions. Then in chapter 14, as you can see, it's on cookies and web storage. Many people are confused over what cookies are. I've read all sorts of articles about cookies being evil and the like. Really, all cookies are it's basically, it's, I don't know if you'd call it code, but it's things that the server writes to the client. They're not executable. You can only have a certain number of cookies, and cookies can only be so long, all right, as far as size. Then in chapter 15, this is one we will spend quite a bit on. The plan is Tuesday of next week, we're going to spend most of the period on chapter 15 talking about arrays. After we talk about arrays, as it says in there, we will talk about sets and maps. This is starting to get you on the transitional phase to some of the stuff that you will be doing in the AWD1111 database-driven website development class that you will take, those of you who will take that this summer. All right. Chapter 16 is how to work with objects. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that just because it would be so easy to confuse people. All right. And there's a way that JavaScript used to write object-oriented code, and there's a way that JavaScript now allows you to write object-oriented code. So we will talk about it, but I'm going to say again, not in a lot of depth and breadth of coverage. All right. So rather than ending right here, I think what I'm going to do is, and I'll give you a break right at 9 o'clock, but let's go over chapter 12. It's not super long. And I just want to talk about in here some of the stuff we have not talked about before. All right. This chapter 12 will have stuff in here that will be on your last test that you will take in a couple weeks. All right. You will be expected to know how to use some of the string methods. You already have been using some of those. We've used things like to uppercase. All right. We've used a few other things in here. Dates. We've looked at dates a little bit in here. All right. They will also talk about internationalization. And the idea is that, for example, with dates, you may or may not be aware of it unless it's changed. And to my knowledge, it has not. When we put in dates, we put in month slash day slash year, or we just have 2 digits for the year, or instead of slashes, we put in hyphens, etc. Most other countries, or many other countries, use the day first. So today would be 12-4 as opposed to 4-12. All right. And in many other countries, the delimiter they use for their dates is they use a period, where we use a slash or a dash. So, I mean, that's when you talk internationalization, it's trying to set your program up so that it'll run and it'll run correctly, regardless of where in the world it is being run. All right. So let's take a quick look and start jumping into this. All right. Now, JavaScript in many ways, I'm not going to say it's weird, not at all. All right. But it allows you to do things that you have trouble doing in other languages. What do I mean? Well, if I were to come in here and just this is going to be real simple. If I came in here and did this, if I said let number 1 equal 27, and I'll put this semicolons in there. Let number 2 equal 0. Let quotient equal number 1 divided by number 2. All right. Now, if you tried to do that in C sharp, so those of you who will be taking the C sharp class with me this summer, if you try to do that in C sharp, the program will blow up because technically the answer is infinity. All right. If you do this in JavaScript, you'll probably end up getting this. So it allows you, because of the way JavaScript is set up, it allows you to actually work with infinity. Not only is there an infinity, which is technically positive infinity, there's even a negative infinity. Do you have to worry about that? No. All right. They do mention a couple of other things in here too. Number max value is the number 1,798 followed by 305 zeros. How somebody came up with that as a delimiter, I have no idea. And the negative is pretty much the equivalent of a negative sense. All right. Now, will you have to know any of this stuff for your next test? Of course not, but I just wanted to mention it to you. All right. You can read that if you're so inclined. All right. Now, methods of the number object. We have used toFixed. You've already done that. And again, quite often you use toFixed. For example, if you're working with dollars and cents, all right, you might set the toFixed to 2, as they show in the example here. All right. Those of you who were in the C sharp class last semester, you know that quite often, and I mean all the time, we use the toString operator. And JavaScript has a toString. Notice that both with toFixed and with toString, they both return a string. And they both they're both designed to work with numeric fields. All right. Now, JavaScript is, and pretty much C sharp is the same way. JavaScript is real friendly. And what I mean is, if I try doing something like this, right, if I come in and do something, just to show you real quick, if I come in and do something like this, if I say let age equal 21, and then later on in my program, I say alert, your age is plus age. It'll come in and it'll say your age is 21. There's not a problem with that. All right. Technically, it's probably cleaner to come in and do the dot to string. It'll work fine without it. But what they're saying is now what we're saying is rather than trying to go and append a number onto a string, now you're appending a string onto a string. So that's considered a little bit cleaner. All right. But of course, you don't have to do that. All right. And they've got some other stuff in here with NaN. You don't have to worry about it. All right. We basically have covered is not a number as much as we need to cover that. Right. All right. Properties and methods of the math object. Well, what do we care about in here? If you are doing mathematical operations, if you were doing something with pi, notice how many decimal points. I just know 3.14159. That's all I know. I figure if I can do it to 5 decimal places, that's fine. Now, all of these, notice that with every one of these, it's math dot something. The only reason I'm telling you that is there is a built-in math class in JavaScript, and that's what this is using. The absolute value, if I say, hey, how old are you? And you say, I'm 27. How old are you? And I say, I'm 66. There are 39 years between us. And it doesn't matter if you were to take the 66 minus 27 or the 27 minus 66. There are still 39 years. So when the positivity or negativity of a value doesn't matter, you can use absolute value. Rounding, hopefully that just makes sense. Ceiling goes up to the next highest number. All right. And what ceiling does, even if you've got 3.1, its ceiling on that would be 4 because that rounds it up to the next highest value. Floor is the opposite. So with floor, even if I have a 4.999, it rounds it down to 4. If I want to go and round up or down based on a number 0.5 and above, I use round. All right. Truncate just gives you the integer portion. Math.pow is a way of doing basically raising something to a power. Square root, okay, and min and max. There are some really good things in here that you can do with this. And they give you some examples. All right. And there's other ways that you can use max and min, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. All right, generating a random number. We've done this before. I already told you or showed you how to do this. We've used the math.random. I mentioned that it gives you a number greater than or equal to 0, but less than 1. We saw how you can generate and change the number. There's even other ways of doing this. Notice returns an integer from 1 to 100. Well, there's a get random number. All right. I showed you it the other way because I thought it made more sense, even though it was a little more typing. All right. It is 9:02. Let's take till 9:15, and I guarantee I'll have you out of here before 10 o'clock. So I'll see you back here at 9:15. Um, All right, it is 9:15, so I'll start back up. I will tell you that when we take the last test for this class, which will technically be on chapters 12 through 16, although there'll be nothing from 16, and you'll know way ahead of time what it'll be about. It will not be based on rock, paper, scissors. I'm just telling you that right now. Okay. Um, what they have you do here is they have you write or create a game called Pig. And what Pig is, they make this a lot harder. All right. Normally you only go to 20, but you shake a die and you keep adding the points that you get every time you shake the die. When you shake the die, really it's a random number between 1 and 6. And so let's say I shake the die 4 times. And for some reason I get 6 and 6 and 6 and 6. I can keep going, but if I get a 1, I go back and I lose all the points that I've gotten for this turn. So I can also do what's called a hold. So now I've got 24 points in the bank. So I'm halfway there just about. And then the next person goes. The reason I'm even taking a little bit of time and explaining this to you is it's interesting because in the AWD1115 database driven website development 2 class that I'm teaching this semester to the 4th year students, we went back and rewrote this Pig application and we rewrote it in C sharp, but we used what's called ASP.NET with it to show you a few things that you can do. All right. I'm not going to say anything about it. They show you the rules and they actually let you play a game right there. All right. You could take a look at the logic and stuff yourselves. I'm not going to run through any of it. It's an interesting enough game, I guess. All right. So I will expect that when you do your next test in a couple, I should say not your next test, but your test on 12 through 16 in a couple weeks or so, that you will understand those numeric functions that we talked about a little earlier and you saw the chart on. Also, that you'll understand how to work with strings. Some of the major string functions are shown here. Now, we've never worked with length, but it should make sense. All right. So if I say JavaScript, well, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 characters in the word JavaScript. So if I put into a variable called message, and then I ask for message.length, you get 10. There's nothing big there. All right. The charat we've used already. If you remember, we used that where we asked the person, do you want to run the program again? Yes or no. And then we did a charat to just grab the first character. And then we also used the 2 uppercase on that you see at the bottom. Concat allows you to basically concatenate or glue together different things if you want to do that. All right. The index of the substrings, etc., those all allow you to work with a string within a string. So let's say you may or may not have ever seen it, but I remember in 8th grade, we had to, as a class, we had to memorize the preamble to the Constitution. You know, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, do hereby, etc., etc. It's probably all I remember from there. But the point is, if I wanted to use that and have that be my string, and I wanted to search through it to see if something existed in there, I could use one or more of the index of the substring with a start and a length, the substring the start, and the substring with the start in the end. All right. Basically, again, what they allow you to do is to search a string to see if it contains another string. All right. And there are plenty of examples right here for it too. And they give you a couple of extra methods. And again, a lot of the stuff that's in here It's not so much that we've gone over them, but it should just make sense. Starts with, ends with. I mean, come on. All right. You can use the includes as another way of checking for substrings. All right. We've used trim before. Trim is actually a combination of trim start and trim end. Pad, maybe you've seen this before. I know that I have. That as an example, that let's say that you're going to get a check that some company sends you and it's for $1.47. All right. That rather than having it say either like, or sometimes you see it like this. That's the way stuff used to be written. Today it's more like this, where they'll have a dollar sign and then something like that, 147. There's a case where you might use some padding because you can pad with blank spaces like this, but more often than not, you're going to pad with some kind of a character. Not always, but quite often. And they mentioned padding in there. You can pad at the beginning, you can pad at the end. All right. And there's a repeat function. Again, there's plenty of things in here with this. All right. The next thing that's in here, this is kind of neat, and it's how to create an array from a string. And this might be the first time in this chapter, at least, that you're a little bit confused. What I want to mention to you is this. If I make a string, all right, the most famous string is hello world. Okay, that's a string. And technically what that is this is an array. What do I mean? Technically what that is str0 is equal to h. And then str1, if I work my way through this, and I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I know this isn't big enough. 7, 8, and 9. And I make this then an E, an L, another L, a O, a blank space, a W, an O, an R, an L, well, it was close, and a D. Now you might look at that and say that's, oh, I guess I skipped one, sorry. You might look at that and say that's fine, who cares? Well, the point is that there are some things that you could do with a string that you cannot do with an array. And there are some things you can do with an array that you cannot do with a string. So sometimes what people end up doing is they end up taking a string, all right, and they end up from that string, they end up creating an array, like I'm showing you right here. Now, it depends on the language you're using, but with some languages, they call that function, basically, they literally call it, that's an explode function, because you're taking something with one thing in it, and here we're changing it to something with 11 things in it. You can also typically in most languages go the other way, where you take this and you convert it into this. And that normally is called an implode type of function. All right. So in this section right here, when they talk about how to create an array from a string, in here, I think it's split, if I remember. Yeah, you use split in here to do that. All right. So we would use split. And what would be the separator? Splits a string into an array based on the value of a separator parameter. All right. And we don't really have any separator parameters in here, but notice what they're showing you. They've got this thing that says Grace M. Hopper. And then they're splitting it and they're saying there isn't anything. So in other words, if I were to have come in here in the example I gave you, and I were to come in and have said, let's say that this is str1, okay, and then I said let str equal str1 dot split and do it like that, that would create this. Okay. And that's exactly what they're trying to tell you in here. And again, there's lots of examples. Okay. Now, there's all sorts of stuff that you can do in here. There are all sorts of string methods. We have not hit all of them. If you wanted a complete list, or you wanted to see better examples, or simpler examples, or more complete examples, I would strongly suggest then that you go in and you take a look at the W3 Schools JavaScript tutorial and go out and find string methods. All right. I'm not going to test you on something like this. I just don't see the need for doing that. All right. When you create a new date object, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You basically get both the date and the time. All right. And notice it says, and this is kind of weird, but there's a reason that was set up like this. In JavaScript, dates are represented by the number of milliseconds since midnight, January 1st, 1970. All right. That was called the epoch, EPOCH value that this is all based off of. All right. And it says JavaScript has access to the time zone on the client computer and adjusts the dates to the local time. That's really important because if you're using JavaScript on your machine, for instance, with all the ones we're using, it thinks that we are working in Central Daylight Time. All right. So right now that it is 9:27 a.m. If we were hooked up to a server someplace, and that server was in another state or in another country, it would depend. So if we were grabbing the date and the time from there, the date would be the same, although it might be formatted differently. The time might be several hours earlier or later, depending on where it was. All right. So what they tell you in here are different ways that you can come in and work with dates. All right. Is it that important? Well, one of the most important things is this right here. Using the word now is just a convention, but you don't have to. There's nothing special about the word now. If I did it right now, if I said const now equal new date, and I ran off now, it would come back with 4/12/2023, 9/28, and 43.475 seconds, something like that. All right. You can, when you specify a date, you can give it a date. That date can be in the future, or that date can be in the past. All right. Now, when you do that, what will happen by default is that JavaScript expects that what you put in for a date is valid. For instance, we're in February, I'm sorry, we're in April, and April has 30 days. So if I tried to specify day 31, so 4/31, I would get an error. All right. And there's a big thing in there too with things like leap years, etc., that kind of stuff. All right. So as it says, when you create a new date object, it's as though you created it like this: the year, the month, the day, the hours, the minutes, the seconds, and the milliseconds. And you can put all of that stuff in there if you want to. Typically, people leave off at least the milliseconds. And if you put in the year, the month, the day, and you don't add an hour, minute, or second, it defaults to midnight. So 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds, 0 milliseconds. Okay. All right. They say here what happens when an invalid date is passed in. So something like this. All right. Typically, when you try to use it, it'll lead to an error message. Now, the weird thing about this, and they mentioned it down here, month numbers start with 0. So January is 0, December is 11. As it says, this allows this to be used with arrays. So typically you would set your array, all right, 0 through 11, okay, would mean that it has 12 elements. You would really want it to have 13, and you wouldn't use element 0. Now, sometimes you find people do anyway. So January is month 0, December is month 11. What we're in right now, April would be month 3, etc. Other people find that way too confusing to use. The date class has a lot of built-in methods. You'll notice that it has several get methods. And as you'll see in just a minute, when I move up the screen, it has several set methods. The get methods, again, are accessors. They allow you to grab something that has already been set. The set method, on the other hand, allows you to set different things. All right, it says, except for the get time method, the get and the set use the time zone specified rather on the user's computer. All right. And there are UTC methods too that allow you to work with, the more universal type of time, the Greenwich Mean Time or GMT. It's not that big a thing. All right. They give you some examples here of working with dates. Now, what are we going to do on the test with dates? The answer is there's one of the reasons I decided to go over this chapter is there's really very little in here on your last test that we're going to need to care about, possibly some of the numeric functions. All right, again, I haven't written this yet, so I don't know. They will have a countdown calendar in here too, just so you know, a countdown timer in here in a little bit. Now, the number of milliseconds in a day, this should make sense. 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, 60 seconds in a minute, 1,000 milliseconds in a second. All right, so when you multiply that together, as it says, it gives you the number of milliseconds in a day. All right, so next is this countdown application. And I think it's, you put in an event, yeah. So you give the event a name and you give it a date. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe the way that this one is set up is if you put in a date that's already passed, it'll do a negative on there, which you typically wouldn't want. But again, I could put in there Christmas Day, 12/25/2023, and it'll come back with something like, 270 days until Christmas Day, something along those lines. And you'll notice that it also figures out the day of the week it is. When you print out information about dates, you have a lot of control over, does it look like this, or does it look like the word Thursday, April 20, APR 22, comma, or the word April, etc. So there are a lot of different date formats that you can use in here, all right, to print things out and make them look different. The JavaScript that's in here, the good news is looking at this, well, first of all, you can tell they wrote it in jQuery. Whether that's good or bad, you can make your own decision. All right. But you'll notice when you start taking a look, really, there's nothing in here that we haven't already had. And what I mean is things like is NaN, all right, setting up the val, setting up text, etc. So there's really nothing in here that we have not already covered. The last thing that's discussed in the chapter, again, is internationalization. One of the reasons that internationalization is so important, believe it or not, is in that first sentence. Remember that JavaScript is under the control of ECMA, which is the European Computer Manufacturers Association. I could pick virtually any spot in Europe right now, and I believe they would be on a different time zone than we are. All right, they wouldn't be under Central Daylight Time. All right. As it says, the internationalization API has a single object named INTL. API is a neat concept. And I will tell you right now, again, those of you who are taking the AWD1111 class in summer, and if you're not, you'd be taking it in fall, you will work a lot with APIs. An API is an application program interface. It's a program that either exists or you write it, and your program can communicate with it. And before you say that's, I don't get it, yeah, you probably do. For instance, one of the programs that I've always had students write in the AWD 1111 class is they have a movie application where you have a text box, you put in the name of a movie or the name of something that's in a movie, like Harry Potter. And then you click a button, and then it goes out and it uses what's called IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, which it uses it as an API, and it goes out there and it grabs all that information, and then it brings back a listing of all the Harry Potter movies. All right. And you learn in the AWD 1111 class how to use built-in APIs and how to create your own APIs. All right. So they get into talking about formatting numbers and formatting dates. All right. And again, there are different formats, different ways and things that are set up depending on the country that you're talking about. All right. So you'll notice in here, there's the US dollar, the Great Britain pound, the euro, etc. So it depends on what you're working with. And I think I went out and saw this, that this is actually pretty good, that it gives you a reference for all of the global stuff, so to speak. All right, and that's it. Now, I'm almost finished, and I said I'd get you done before 10, and I will. But when we look in here, chapter 12, improve the validation of the countdown app. Here, they're making sure that you put in something that is valid. All right. And here, add dates to this invoice application. All right. I don't know if we'll do any of those, if we'll do both of those, if we'll do one of those. I really don't know right now. All right. And let's see on the other one here. This one we've already done. Develop a change calculator. All right, displaying the minimum numbers. So I would see no reason to do that. We already have done that one. And this developing a calendar application. That one's kind of cool because you can put in any month in here and it'll create a calendar for you based off of that month. We may or may not do that one. A password generator. This is basically developing your own password generator. So if I say I want something with 10 characters, it'll create something along the lines of this. All right. And that's it. All right. So tomorrow again will be your test. Friday will be a lab day. The homework for chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10 will be due this Sunday by midnight, the 16th. And now that we've covered chapter 12, we will do chapters 13 and 14 on Monday of next week. On Tuesday, we will do chapters 15 and 16. On Wednesday, we will go through several examples. All right. And I don't know if we'll be ready for a pretest or not, but possibly I'll give you time on Thursday, and then the following week, we will have a test on this and we'll go over 17, 18, and 19. For those 3 chapters at the end of the book, you will not be required to do any homework, to do any labs, to do any written tests. All right. That's all I had. So Grant, unless you had any questions on anything, that's basically all I had for today.
Not right now, thank you.
Okay, all right. I'll talk to you then. I'll be here tomorrow at 8:05 to go over the test directions. See you then. Thanks.
Thanks.